Hello everyone, welcome to the video. My name is Maze and today will be the second part of making our picture frame urn, specifically the picture frame. So first I'm ripping off some chunks of cherry. I'm taking them all from the same board, that way they have the same coloration and grain pattern is similar. And I'm going to be making mitered half lap joints. This is my first time really doing it by hand. Normally I would use a table saw or a router to make my lap joints and my mitered lap joints. But like I said in the last video, I wanted to do as much of it by hand as I could because it's an urn for somebody who I knew. So first thing you need to do is just to make one side of it and just to start off as if it's just a regular half lap joint. And so I cut down the tenon side of it, and then I come back and I cut down on the shoulder. And once I get that done, then I usually use a file to kind of clean up my saw marks, and then I'll use a chisel and put it into my actual marking gauge knife wall and finalize the cut. And then you got to make the 45-degree cut. So again, I'm using my chisel to make a nice knife wall that I can then come in with my saw and saw down. So this part doesn't have to be perfect because you could take this over to the shooting board. The female side of it, which I'm making right here, can't be taken to a shooting board, so you have to be a little bit pickier with that. And in this one, you're doing the miter on the actual half lap, so you take you mark it out and then you make a knife wall with your chisel, and then you use those knife walls to saw up against. So on this side I found it easier to cut the shoulder first and then come and cut the tenon part. That way you have kind of a stop line where you can, so you don't overcut on your tenon. And then once you make those, you do it 4 times and you glue them together. I usually use a kind of a paste that is sawdust and wood glue when I'm making things like this because it fills in any of the gaps. And this being my first time doing it by hand, there's a little bit more gaps than I normally would accept, but the first one wasn't that great, and then the last one was perfect. That's how it normally is. After your 4th time it should be perfect, but I knew the guy who I'm making this for was real supportive of my woodworking, and he would have, I think, appreciated me doing it by hand. Having it done by hand and having it be not perfect would have been, he would have appreciated that more than me just having it perfect and done at the table saw, I think, And so I glued up 2 halves, and then I glued up the 2 halves together. And then I'm marking out the holes here for the brass screws, so I could drill the holes and have them look good and symmetrical. Usually with an urn you have an opening that is screwed in, so that way you could put the remains in. And so hiding the screws is kind of a trick to different urn designs. And so you might be looking at it and thinking it's kind of small for an urn, but this is only supposed to be for partial remains, and so it is not as big as it would need to be for full remains. But pretty much they're going to take as much as they can and put them in here, and then they're going to scatter the rest. So it was more about aesthetic choice than actual function choice as far as this goes. And then I needed to put a hinge on the picture frame, that way you could lift up the picture frame, get access to it to put different pictures in, and also that will be where you could reach the screws and to put in the remains. And so I'm just laying it out and using my marking tools to mark it out, and then I'll come back with the chisel and chisel it out. And then to hold it in place, I'll use a trick from Crimson Guitars, where you take masking tape and you put it on both sides, and then you glue the masking tape together with super glue, kind of like a double-sided tape trick. And then you do that, and then you could drill the holes, and then your hinges should work perfectly after that. So then when you're screwing in these hinges, I always screw them in by hand. Brass screws do not really work well with drills, and especially impact drivers. It will just strip them. So you always want to screw in your hinges by hand. And there it is, the picture frame added to the repository. And this could be done, just get some glass really. But they are not going to hang it up, they want to stand it up. So I'm going to be making a base, and then I am going to be carving into the picture frame into the next video. So that's where I'm going to leave you at for right now. Thanks very much for watching. Actually, before you go, I want to show you some things I learned. So here you can see on my mitered half lap joints that on one side of the joint you're going to get end grain, and I should have put the end grain so it ended up on top of the frame, because you're going to see the top and the bottom of the frame a lot less often than you're going to see the sides. So that's something you should keep in mind. And also my hinge, I kind of cut into my dovetail, and so I should have put the hinge on the actual frame instead of on the repository. That way the integrity of my dovetails was held. For aesthetic reasons, you only see half of the dovetail, and so I don't think it's going to suffer structurally, but it doesn't look as good as it could have. So keep that in mind. The end grain should be on top and bottom of the frame, I think. And then for this particular case, the hinge should have been on the picture frame and not the repository, so that I still have the aesthetic value of the dovetails. Alright, so that's what I learned. That's what I would do different if I was to do it again. And that's the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, if you would hit that like button, I'd very much appreciate it. And before you go, I got a special announcement from everybody's favorite YouTuber, PewDiePie.
Smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe, smash, subscribe. What are we gonna do? Smash, subscribe. That's right.
That is right, PewDiePie. Thank you very much. And as always, support your local craftsmen or get out in your workshops and make your own dust.